Julia Boggs Dent was born on January 26, 1826 at Whitehaven Plantation, west of St. Louis, Missouri. Julia was born with strabismus, which prevents both eyes from lining up in the same direction. At one point, one of the best surgeons in the country offered to perform the simple operation that would fix them. Julia was not keen on surgery and declined. During 1831 to 1836, Julia attended the Gravius School, a coeducational one-room schoolhouse in St. Louis, Missouri. From age 10 to age 17, Julia attended the Mrs. Morris boarding school in St. Louis with the daughters of other affluent parents. Julia was a boarding student during the week and returned home to Whitehaven on weekends. In 1844, Ulysses S. Grant began visiting the Dent family. At one point, her pet canary died, and Ulysses crafted a small yellow coffin and summoned 8 fellow officers for an avian funeral service. In April of that year, Ulysses asked Julia to wear his class ring as a sign of their exclusive affection. Grant's regiment was then ordered to Louisiana in preparation for service in the Mexican-American War. Distraught at their separation, Julia had an intense dream, which she detailed to several people, that Grant would somehow return within days wearing civilian clothes, and stated his intention of staying for a week. Despite the unlikeliness of the dream, Ulysses did return just as Julia had predicted, and the two became engaged. In July 1848, after they had been apart for 4 years, Grant's regiment returned to the United States, and he took leave so he could make wedding arrangements in St. Louis, Missouri. After the Grants were married, Ulysses returned to the army. Julia gave birth to Frederick Dent Grant in 1850 and Ulysses Simpson Grant in 1852, while her husband was dispatched to the West Coast for several years. Unhappy to be so far from his family, Ulysses resigned from the army in 1854, and the Grants moved to a small farm called Hard Scrabble in St. Louis, Missouri. Ulysses became ill with malaria and was unable to run his farm. The family moved in with Julia's parents in Whitehaven. Once he recovered, he took a job collecting rents for a real estate firm in St. Louis. At the beginning of the American Civil War, Ulysses helped organize volunteers and soon took command of the Illinois troops. Lonely without his wife, Ulysses sent for Julia. She left the children with relatives, and over the course of the American Civil War, she stayed with Ulysses during campaigns at Memphis, Vicksburg, Nashville, and Virginia. After the American Civil War had ended, Julia was thrilled with her husband's nomination for the presidency in 1868 and immersed herself in his campaign. She was such a major figure in her husband's bid for the presidency that after his inauguration, Ulysses S. Grant turned to his wife and said, "And now, my dear, I hope you are satisfied." After 4 years of war, an assassination, and an impeachment trial, Washington, D.C. was ready for a little levity, and Julia obliged. She offered a full array of events and became a popular hostess. She planned lavish state dinners where guests enjoyed expensive wines and liquors. She also received callers at informal receptions as long as the ladies wore hats and the men left their weapons at home. Although Julia spent a great deal of money, she avoided the kind of spending criticism that had been directed at Mary Lincoln. Julia also sought to imbue the position of First Lady with the appropriate prestige. She believed that the position should command the same dignity and honors accorded wives of foreign leaders, and she was frustrated when the role was not publicly acknowledged. When the 1876 presidential election between Rutherford B. Hayes and Samuel Tilden ended in dispute, Julia saw an opportunity to extend her time in the executive mansion. She thought her husband should remain president until the matter could be settled. Her husband disagreed with that, and when Congress settled the election in favor of Hayes, Julia prepared to leave the executive mansion. After accompanying her husband on a 2-year world tour that took them to Europe, Africa, and Asia, Julia and Ulysses settled in New York, to enjoy their retirement from public life. However, all their money was lost in an unwise investment scheme, and the Grants were reduced to poverty. Shortly afterward, Ulysses developed a throat cancer that led to his death in 1885. In his dying days, Grant completed his personal memoirs, which left Julia and their children financially secure. As a widow, Julia lived in Washington, D.C., where she wrote her own memoirs. Julia Grant was the first lady to write a memoir, though she was unable to find a publisher. She had attended in 1897 the dedication of the Grant Monument tomb overlooking the Hudson River in New York City. She died on December 14, 1902. She was laid to rest in a sarcophagus beside her husband at General Grant's National Monument. Almost 75 years later, the personal memoirs of Julia Dent Grant were finally published in 1975.